At the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience in Meridian, we believe in the power of the arts, storytelling, and education, just like Mississippi Public Broadcasting. MPB connects communities across the state with quality programs that inform, inspire, and engage. Their audience is loyal and appreciative of businesses that support public broadcasting, which makes underwriting on MPB a smart investment. Join us in supporting MPB. Learn more at mpbfoundation.org.
School choice, rural hospitals, voter access. The 2026 Mississippi Legislature will impact you and your family for years to come. MPB brings you At Issue, a weekly analysis of the legislative session and the issues affecting you with perspectives from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones and new At Issue analyst Rebecca Staples join me, Wilson Stribling, every Monday at 5 p.m. only on MPB Think Radio and wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
From MPB Think Radio, this is The Sit Down with Russ Latino, where we discuss the ideas and people that are shaping Mississippi's future. I hope that you are having a lovely Wednesday afternoon. If you're joining us via the old-fashioned terrestrial radio across the state, or if you're watching us on YouTube, streaming live, or heck, even if you're not listening on Wednesday and you happen to have picked this up on a podcast format like Spotify or Apple, we enjoy being with you. It has been a really rainy couple of weeks.
It's been a really rainy and a really humid couple of weeks. That humidity we had like 4 days ago was wild.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. Like, I can remember being a kid talking about this. Is like, you're in Mississippi or South Louisiana. A lot of my people from South Louisiana, when you step out of the door and within 2 minutes you're like, I need a shower.
Yeah, you ain't even hit sun good yet.
I am just covered, and it ain't even sweat yet.
Yeah,
it's just humidity. Yeah. Attaching itself to your warm body.
Yeah, I thought I was
like
living in the Amazon rainforest at one point in time. I mean, it was so humid, it looked like fog.
So, we talked about Neshoba last week with Representative Scott Bounce, who's the chairman of the Neshoba County Fair Association. That is going on right now.
How was the weather?
Rainy and nasty.
Okay.
Lots of people that I've talked to have said there's just mud pits everywhere. And you sink down in it, people losing shoes and stuff. Oh. The kind of fun experience that you want when you go to the fair.
I mean, in Neshoba County, it's going to happen. There's mud and dirt.
But a lot of years, it's just like that really fine clay dust.
Yeah.
That's all over the place.
Yeah.
And it just attaches to your clothes, your car. You park your car outside of the Neshoba County Fair for a couple hours and go back to it, and it is covered because it is so fine, and the wind just blows it everywhere.
Wow.
So at least you don't look at it this way. If you're out there up to your knees in mud right now, at least you're not covered in red clay.
No, you're right. You're right.
Well, I guess it's red mud.
Yeah, it's red mud.
Come to think of it, that's going to stain.
If you get it out quick, it will not clay up on you.
That's going to stain. Anyway, there are political talks going on. Started today. Wednesday and Thursday, for those of us who are politicos, are the big speech days. Today, they heard from Treasurer David McCray, Attorney General Lynn Fitch, Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, as well as some of the federal candidates. Ty Pinkins, who is running as an independent against Cindy Hyde-Smith, and then Scott Colomb, who is running as the Democratic candidate against Cindy Hyde-Smith in the U.S. Senate race. Both spoke, as well as the 3rd Congressional District Democratic candidate Michael Chiarello, which is how you would say it if you were being authentically Italian.
You did it.
But he may say Chiarello. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
So, but let's talk about the way that Grandma Grace would say it. It'd be Chiarello.
Yeah.
Anyway, they all spoke today. Nothing like crazy out of the ordinary. No stripping of bark. I mean, there was criticism that came from Scott Colomb and Ty Pinkins towards Cindy Hyde-Smith, who's, by the way, not speaking, not because I think she's avoiding it, but because they actually are doing things at the U.S. Capitol, believe it or not, right now, including some important votes, and we'll get to that maybe a little bit later. But there was nothing that came out that I was like, oh, that's sexy. Because politics aren't sexy, I guess. But sometimes it can be entertaining. Sometimes it can be a train wreck.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's salacious stuff that happens.
Yeah.
I have none of that to report.
Everybody was good.
Well, I think at some level, too, like people are waiting on candidates to announce their intentions. Mm-hmm. Like if you were to ask the average Politico who's running for governor right now, they would say Andy Gibson because he's announced that he's running for governor. And they would say Philip Gunn because he's announced that he's running for governor. Yeah. But they would also tell you Lynn Fitch, Shad White, maybe Tommy Duff. Gerard Gibbert, who hosts the program on Super Talk, business guy. So those names are floating around out there. But with the exception of Andy and Philip, nobody has formally said, I'm running. Yeah. They're just raising money like they're running. They're just talking like they're not running for their current position.
Is that feeling out the pool? Is that to feel the pool?
I think to some degree. I think there's also this element. And by the way, if you want to be a part of this conversation, you can join us at 1-877-MPB ring. Also 1-877-672-7464. Yeah. Should I say it slower? 877-672.
That's it.
7464.
That's it.
That's the ASMR coming back out. I don't know if you remember that from the conversation with Derek Emerson or not, but I have a secret ASMR YouTube channel and does very well.
I gotta have the link.
Yeah, I just lied. I actually don't.
Figured,
it was
but
real
I want
sarcasm.
to hear you do
but,
that.
But yeah, we can do this.
There it is. Oh,
Russell. We can do it like this. That's such an NPR voice too, right?
Yes, it is.
Now we're going to talk about the news.
Yes.
It reminds me of the Saturday Night Live, the sweaty balls.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
the joke.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was spelled SCHWEDDY. It was the person's name, and they were making holiday sausage balls. Alec Baldwin, it's a famous guy. Anyway, the voice just now kind of reminded me of that.
That's it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not that pleasant. Anyway,
you are.
So here's what I think people are waiting on.
Okay.
I think people are waiting to see what Tommy Duff does. And for a lot of people listening,
I don't know Tommy.
See, that was going to be the response that I was gonna say. A lot of people,
I know Philip, all of them, but I don't know Tommy.
So Tommy Duff has never run for political office. He's a businessman that's located in Columbia, Mississippi, outside of Hattiesburg. His father, a while back, his father's now passed away, but his father started a tire store as a side business. His father was an attorney in Hattiesburg. And then Tommy and his brother Jim Duff built said side business into a national tire repair maintenance company called Southern Tire Mart.
Okay, I've seen that.
And then with the success of said Southern Tire Mart, have bought up lots of other businesses.
Okay.
So T.L. Wallace Construction that does road construction, they own KLM Trucking.
Wow.
So anyway, Tommy got a little cash, is the short version. Forbes says he's the richest guy in Mississippi. I think the last number was somewhere in the $3 billion range.
Let's go, Tommy.
So he has been having, I think, conversations with folks about the potential of running for governor, and is the kind of guy that potentially could stroke, his own check to run a campaign. So let's say that campaign costs $10 to $15 million. If you're worth $3 billion. And have some liquidity, then it's not that much or far-fetched to think that he could enter the race in a big way. And folks that don't currently know who he is would suddenly be inundated with digital ads and television and radio and all the ways that people get introduced to politicians.
He could pull a hole in the whole thing.
There could be a saturation point. So I don't think that necessarily means that if he gets in the race that he's a shoo-in. Because Mississippians got a little populist streak, don't necessarily like the idea of races getting bought.
Yeah.
But I do think that if you're some of these other candidates, you would have to at least consider the possibility that running for another office could be an easier path. And so it really just depends on like how sold out are you on running for governor at this stage. So as an example, there's some hubbub about the potential that Auditor Shad White might look at the Attorney General's race if he didn't feel good about the governor's race. I don't know that to be true. Shad's not told me that.
Yeah.
But, there are whispers that get around political circles. The short version of this is it looks like it's going to be a crowded field for governor.
Do you think there could be a turnover in the seat with this field being so crowded?
You mean towards the Democratic side?
No, just in governor, for the governor.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, well, of course, Tate's term limited.
Yeah.
So it's going to be somebody new. I think what happens in that race, though, is going to affect all these down ticket races. And so if Lynn Fitch is running for governor, as most people would bet today, that means the Attorney General's office is open. If Shad White is running for governor, as most people anticipate today, that means that the auditor's office is open. We know that ag commissioner is open. So there's this trickle effect. And so I think in a lot of ways, people are waiting to see what some of the big names do, whether it's Duff or Fitch or White or Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, who gets left out a lot of these conversations, but certainly has a war chest there. Certainly has a history of winning statewide races, would be formidable in its own right. So I think anyone who tells you that they know what's going to happen is a snake oil salesman. They don't, in fact, have that crystal ball. But I would say this, that there are already people who are aggregating around some of these down ticket races. So, I mean, we talked to both Nick Bain, the former representative, and Senator Daniel Sparks, who have both already announced that they're running for auditor.
Okay.
There are other people that are looking at that auditor's race as well. There is a banking lawyer named Phil Buffington whose name is floating around that race. Never been elected before, but well respected within his sort of industry and community. And then on the AG's race, DPS Commissioner Sean Tyndall, his name is out there. He hasn't announced, but his name is out there for that race.
Okay.
He's been on the program before. Aaron Rice has been on the program with us before. That's another name that's floating around out there as a potential AG candidate. And then you never know. Somebody else could shift from a higher race down. So lots of moving pieces.
Looks like it's going to be fun.
Normally, Neshoba would be the place where you'd be like, let's figure this mess out.
Yeah.
We're not quite there yet.
Okay.
Lots of boring speeches today. We got to take a break.
Okay.
When we come back, I want to talk about AI cameras and whether or not they're going to be used to give you a ticket on a Mississippi roadway.
Oh, I saw a man. He was mad the other day about it. Online.
You're listening to The Sit Down. We'll be right back after this.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
School choice, rural hospitals, voter access. The 2026 Mississippi Legislature will impact you and your family for years to come. MPB brings you At Issue, a weekly analysis of the legislative session and the issues affecting you with perspectives from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones and new At Issue analyst Rebecca Staples join me, Wilson Stribling, every Monday at 5 p.m. only on MPB Think Radio and wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Hatred destroys the one who hates. The others that you hated go on about their business. Care less.
So the legacy of Medgar Evers is an understanding of our own humanity and of our own responsibility of seeing that in other people.
He is written out of history. He's just not included as Malcolm and Martin. To me, it's the 3 M's, and Medgar is right up there at the lead.
Everlasting, Life and Legacy of Medgar Evers. Watch now on MPB Passport. Visit mpbonline.org for more.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. Enjoying a little back and forth with my friend Germaine today as we talk about politics and all sorts of things going on around Mississippi. Neshoba County Fair happening right now. Lots of politicos out there doing their thing, kissing babies, shaking hands, whatever it is they do.
I love the kissing babies part. It's the best part of being a politician. Is to hold a baby.
Yeah, I would. I don't have a baby anymore. My kids are a little bit more grown, but I would prefer that random people not kiss my baby. Call me weird.
I didn't even say I was going to vote for you, sir. Put my baby down. No.
I don't like you. Also, do you want a mint?
Yeah.
Like what? I don't know where the saying came from, but I guess it's a thing. I should say before we shift off of this, there are a couple of other pretty important vacancies coming up.
Okay.
So whether the lieutenant governor runs for governor or whether he decides to call it a day and go sit on a front porch somewhere with hay stuck in his mouth, twiddling something down, I don't know.
Yeah.
Regardless of what he does, he's term limited at lieutenant governor, which means there will be a new lieutenant governor. All bets right now are that that's going to be Secretary of State Michael Watson, who is the only announced candidate for that particular position. And I have not heard any other what I would consider viable name mentioned for that race. And normally, I've got my ear to the ground a little bit, Germaine. Normally, I hear stuff. I've not heard any other viable name mentioned for that race. I think he's got a big moat created.
Okay.
So that'll be one to look at. And because he's probably moving on, that means Secretary of State is also open. And right now, the only name that I've heard for that particular position is Whitney Lipscomb, who used to be with the AG's office. Whitney's also been on with us. You know what, Germaine? Every single one of these people have been on with us. It's like we occasionally get some decent interviews.
Yeah, we got a lot of big name people who...
I'm just saying, today you're stuck with me.
No.
But if this is the first time you've ever listened, normally there are much more important people on the radio with me.
Look, I got a question, because I'm not all the way engulfed in politics, but let's just take Delbert's seat, lieutenant governor. If he runs for another seat and he doesn't get that seat, does he get to go back? How does that work?
No, because he's term limited, right? So the way the Mississippi Constitution is written, you get 2 terms as lieutenant governor. He's at the end of his second term.
So, of course, he would move seats to something else or move into another role.
Yeah, I mean, he either has to move up or say, you know what, I'm going to be 80 by the time the election occurs, and maybe that's good enough for me to go and again sit on the porch with the mayor.
And when they come out early, that's when we have special elections and things like that, because we've got to fill the seat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it does make sense.
We had 2 special elections called today. Unfortunately, 2 members of the House of Representatives the last couple of weeks have passed away. So the governor set special elections for those 2 seats. I think it's House District 77 and House District 70 for November 3rd, which is, of course, midterm election day as well. I mentioned before the break that we were going to talk about Big Brother, whether or not Big Brother was coming for you on the highways, byways, and interstates of Mississippi. Look, we're going to have to grapple with this over the next several years. We've got incredible new technologies, and I think we're going to have to figure out what are the limits of how we use those technologies. What are we comfortable with as a people? China, as an example, has cameras all over their country. They monitor everything that the people do. That probably helps cut down on crime.
Yeah.
It does,
They've got a lot of people.
But then there's not very much freedom involved in that. There's not much privacy involved in that. They do things like give people social scores that determine whether or not they get access to things, whether or not they're allowed to speak. That's Brave New World, 1984-ish kind of dystopian literature stuff.
Okay.
And so I think we've got to figure out, as we introduce new technologies like AI cameras that can determine whether or not you're on your cell phone down at your lap while you're driving, peering into your vehicle in a way that a police officer could not, whether or not that's a good idea. Thomas in Greenwood apparently has a comment on this.
He's already ready.
And so I've got thoughts, but I want to hear Thomas's thoughts instead.
Hey, Thomas, you're on with Russ.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Russ and Germaine. Look, there's nothing I can say other than thank you for shining light on this, because without the Magnolia Tribune and your efforts, this probably would have been, this contract would have been approved, and we would be trying to deal with it in hindsight rather than being proactive. My only concern my real concern about this is a for-profit company, and they are selling this service based on the amount of revenue it will generate from tickets. And since it is AI, my concern is what keeps the company from altering the video before it's sent to the officer to show that there was a violation when there was none or was no violation. Because if they don't get a certain amount of revenue generated from this venture, then they might not renew the contract. And what was the safeguard that the DPS was putting in place to keep them to know that they were getting actual real video and not something that was altered in some way to show a violation when there wasn't one?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Let me back up a little bit, though, and maybe give some context for people who may not have been following the kerfuffle that I unleashed on the state in the last week. The Department of Public Safety had requested from ITS, which is the information technology service essentially for the state of Mississippi, approval of a sole source contract with a company that's actually based out of Australia that sells these AI cameras that they put up on roadways to detect traffic violations. Last Thursday, that particular contract was considered by ITS and approved by ITS with the testimony is the wrong word, but with the input of a deputy at DPS, Major Henley, who showed up and explained how the technology would be used. And as part of his explanation, he basically relayed, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the exact quote in front of me, he basically relayed that these cameras would catch the violation then gets sent to a police officer who's down the road, and that officer pulls over the person and issues the citation. We posted a story about this on social media platforms, as one does these days if you want people to see it. And it kind of went crazy. It had over 1 million views, several thousand engagements, several thousand sort of, voluntary shares across the state of Mississippi and beyond. And it caused a stir up where on Monday, Commissioner Tyndall came out and posted a video in which he said they weren't going to be signing the contract now. And that they had never intended to use it the way that Major Henley had represented, right? They never had intended to use it to give tickets to people. I think the concern, whether that's true, whether there's some confusion within the department itself as to what they were trying to do, I don't know the answer to that. But I think the concern is that once you introduce something like this, it becomes a slippery slope. So you could say, for instance, we're only going to use this to ticket 18-wheelers. And maybe some folks will go, okay, well, that's reasonable. Those are commercial vehicles, right? But then once you open that door and there's revenue pouring in because of it, do you then switch and start using it for everyday folks, for Jim and Joe down the road? And I think what we see in other states that have used this kind of technology is the answer is yes, that the revenue is just too lucrative and too exciting for people not to want to use it that way. I think the question that you ask is a question that a lot of privacy experts ask, which is what's to prevent, even if I think this is a good idea. And by the way, the response that we got, about 95% of Mississippians did not particularly love this idea.
They're like, no.
They did not love the idea. But even if you think it's a good idea, how do you prevent the data from being abused? And you're right at some level to be concerned about that for can the data be manipulated because it's a private company? I think the other part of this is that there's some evidence that these cameras in other states have been abused by law enforcement themselves. Now, I'm not putting this on all law enforcement. There are great members of the law enforcement community, but there are also bad members of the law enforcement community because they're people, and people are prone to doing silly things, regardless whether or not they have a badge. Well, some of the flock cameras, as an example, have been used by law enforcement to track love interest. There was a police chief in Kansas that was ultimately dismissed once he was found out, but he had been tracking his girlfriend and had used the system 228 times to read her license plate and track her around town. There was another fella in Milwaukee that did something very similar, but not only was he tracking his girlfriend, but he was also tracking her ex-boyfriend close to 200 times. He had used the system to do this. There are lots of examples like this out there. So I think there's the beginning concern, which is a privacy concern. Like, do we really want Big Brother watching us? Like, what is the trade-off between catching criminals and our privacy? And then the second concern is, like, even if you think this is an okay idea, how do you make sure that it doesn't get abused
and manipulated, like Thomas is saying,
in really bad ways? So, Thomas, I think your point is a great point. Lindsay, if you can hang on, we've got to go to commercial break. But when we get back, I will take up your call right after, because it looks like you've got a point that is very relevant to this conversation. So please hang on. You're listening to The Sit Down. We will be right back.
Together through the years, together in the future. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
Mississippi is a place of deep roots where every story matters and every voice can be heard. At MPB, we stand with our local communities, bringing you the voices of those who shape our state through local programming that reflects our culture across small towns to big cities, from the Delta to the coast. We tell the stories that define us, from the music that carries our voices to the leaders who inspire change. MPB brings you the heart of Mississippi, celebrating Mississippi one story at a time. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to The Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. We're talking about, before the break, are we living 1984? Is it dystopian horror with cameras monitoring everything you do? Or are traffic cameras just one more way to make the road safer? I think there are probably different perspectives on that. If you want to be a part of the conversation, you can join us today. 1-877-MPB-RING. That's 1-877-672-7464. Lindsay is on the line, I think, on this subject as well. Lindsay, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. What you got today? What you thinking?
So one of the things I wanted to bring up is that even though this one instance of the cameras out of Australia being denied and not coming through with the contract, is that flock cameras are already all over the state of Mississippi and all over the country. And these are AI-based cameras. They're pretty low profile. You'll see them on like telephone poles, and they can be brought in by private citizens, by HOAs, by police departments, by companies, and they are looking at all of the different attributes of our cars, including the make, model, the year, if there's stickers on them or decals, and also just picking up on those patterns. They can be used in all of the same malicious ways that you've stated before, like these other cameras, and they're already here. And if you go to dflock.org, you can look at a map where you can see all of the cameras across the country.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I do think that the particular technology that DPS was at least considering or had the contract approved for is a little bit different than a flock camera. I think it's probably a little bit more advanced. So we may just be talking about degrees of invasion if you look at it that way. But I think it is true, and a lot of people are not aware that there are flock cameras all over the state. They're sort of concentrated in particular communities. Like I know Rankin County uses flock cameras pretty aggressively as an example, in a couple municipalities there.
We're not ticketed though for them in Rankin County.
No. So the way that this works, and this is actually a good point, is that there is a state law that prevents fixed cameras from being used in an automated way to send you a ticket, right? Now, what the flock cameras are doing, as I understand it right now, is they are identifying using license plates whether or not someone is insured. And then essentially a private company sends a notice to you saying that, hey, you're not insured. And they've set up what almost looks like a separate kind of privately run court to deal with uninsured motorists. And so that's my appreciation, at least, of how the flock cameras are currently being used. They're not being used for traffic violations like you were going too fast or you didn't have your seatbelt on or your phone or whatever. I think the question becomes a slippery slope question. Is like, hey, if you already do it for this, do you eventually expand to do it for other things? Right now, there's a state law in the way. Now, a lot of people in response to the AI camera story around DPS were saying, well, they can't do this. This is illegal. There's a state law that prevents it. There are a couple caveats to that. When they wrote that law, I think back in 2009 with fixed cameras, it talks about municipalities or local governments not being able to use fixed cameras for automated tickets. It does not explicitly address whether or not DPS, state troopers, can use it. So that's the first question as to whether or not that state law would have prevented what DPS was trying to do. The second question about whether or not state law prevents it is that the way that law is written, it prevents automated tickets from being issued based on those cameras. There's an argument that the camera is not giving the ticket, right? The camera is capturing the violation, sending it to the officer. The officer is then giving the ticket. So that is the way that some of these companies are trying to circumvent laws that prevent this kind of monitoring by saying, hey, it's kind of like a tag team hybrid thing. It's not a direct fixed camera system that's automatically giving tickets. Lindsay, are you aware of other – I know you mentioned there's a website. I mean, where are the communities that are doing this in Mississippi? Do you have a sense of that?
I actually looked at it earlier today, and I've selfishly only looked at my area. So I checked Oxford, and around Oxford there's probably about 8 to 10 cameras. And I happened to be sitting in a coffee shop in Memphis, and so when I looked at my current location, I saw hundreds of cameras collected around Memphis. But I did find it interesting that a lot of them are posted at the entrances of neighborhoods where you can tell that it's been a neighborhood decision to install that camera. And as a homeowner, I could totally see the benefit of, you know, something suspicious happened in the neighborhood and we can look and see if a strange car came in. But at the same time, I don't want to give away my right to privacy. And knowing that these cameras could be used by, you know, law enforcement to avoid getting like a warrant to track cell phone data because they already have access to track you using your license plate. That just doesn't seem like it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think there are lots of big ethical questions that are going to have to be answered as we think about how we use modern technology, right? Because there certainly was a point where I'm sure that people were up in arms about the idea of radar getting used to detect your speed, right? And now it's just sort of accepted as commonplace. I think the question is like how comfortable and whether or not these things will ultimately be accepted as commonplace, and it's something that we'll keep grappling with. Lindsay, thank you for the phone call. You know, I think in a broader sense, we just got to figure out, because there's a continuum here. We've got to figure out what is acceptable and what is not acceptable.
So here's the story that I came across on social, and it was a gentleman in Florida who had received a ticket from an automated camera. I don't know if it was actually given to him by a physical officer, but the automated camera is what ticketed him. I think it was running a red light. Crazy part was he was not in the state. And it was incorrect. It was incorrect ticketing of him. And so he had to literally go through another AI, I guess, program to be able to appeal. And it just became a whole cluster of mess.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I used to make fun of the grandmas on Facebook that got fooled by AI because it was so obvious to me. It'd be like, here's Dolly Parton and Reba McEntire.
That was the beginning of AI,
in a boat, in Chattanooga helping people after a flood, and they were like in ball gowns. And like my grandmother's like, oh, they're the best people ever. And I'm like, not real. Maybe good people, not real. Right. Or for a while, there was this Peyton Manning obsession on some of these that were popping up on my Facebook. It was like Peyton Manning showed up to somebody's wedding whose dad had died and walked her down the aisle.
He was there.
And it's like, I think Peyton Manning's probably a pretty good dude, but he's not like randomly searching on the knot. He's not like, hey, show me people whose dads recently passed away.
And I'm heading to the wedding.
So that was happening for a while. And I was like, good gosh, you can't be this gullible. Like, maybe you shouldn't be online. Now AI is getting so darn good that sometimes like I've got to like do double takes at things and like, oh, is this real? Is this not real? And it's going to get exponentially better. Like we're at the beginning of the floodgates opening.
Right.
It is going to be so good that the fear is that you literally could show someone committing a crime.
Like Thomas was saying, Thomas said it could be manipulated.
And then like, is it true or not?
Right.
Who knows? I mentioned Rankin County. We got a Rankin County caller, Michael from Rankin County. Michael, are you scared by this, or you think it's no big deal?
I would be concerned myself with what we're seeing cities and municipalities and states go towards these days. It's quite concerning. To add on to what Lindsay said, you can map out the flock cameras to deflock.org, and there's another website out there. I think in one city in Rankin County that I had looked at, there was about 9. Most of those were mainly around the airport and, oddly enough, the schools, which I found to be odd. I didn't see so much as neighborhoods. More or less it was high-trafficked areas. But one thing I wanted to add was that we know about flocks, we know about the tag reader, so to speak, but another technology that's out there that's coming down the pipeline at some point, and hopefully we don't see it here in Mississippi, but it's what they call the Leonardo signal trace. And it's essentially doing the same thing that the tag readers are, but it's almost combining the flock cameras and the AL and the insurance cameras, because what it's doing is it's reading your tag, but it's also getting your device signals, whether you have earbuds or whether you have your cell phone or your iPad or any kind of electronic device is sending out a signal. It then creates a profile for you in that system. So just to add on to what Lindsay was saying, flock is just the tip of the iceberg, and the insurance cameras were the slippery slope to begin with. But I, for one, am vehemently against them, and glad to see that DPS has shut down the access for most of the municipalities to get that information in Mississippi.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. As we talk about DPS maybe looking at whether or not to use the AI cameras, that they actually have been helpful in maybe restricting the way that some of the municipalities are trying to use data that they're gathering. So, to the extent people were mad at DPS, that it's maybe willing to recognize that they also have on the other end of this done some stuff to restrict the use of the technology. I think I said this to somebody the other day who was making the point that like these things also solve crimes, right? Like one of the reasons that they're probably close to schools is you want to discourage people from speeding in slow speed zones around schools and those sorts of things. I think that the question that you've got to ask yourself is, again, on the continuum, what are you willing to accept in terms of invasion of privacy, in terms of how much you're getting monitored as a citizen? Because there's a universe in which I could design a society in which there was zero crime. No crime at all. Like, I could figure that out. You would have almost no freedom, right? But I could stop crime. And so we constantly in this country, a country, we're talking about 250th anniversary coming up here, a country that was conceived in liberty. We constantly have been fighting this fight around security versus liberty, right? The famous Benjamin Franklin quote, right? The man that would surrender liberty for security essentially deserves neither. And I think we've constantly had tension with that. Technology is making it that much harder. technology is making it such that like we're going to have to answer some big questions around whether or not we think that the safety that is provided by creating these systems is so good and so valuable to society that it's worth surrendering our liberty, that it's worth having the government know at all times where you are, what you're doing, what you have on your cell phone. I can only speak for myself. I would prefer to err on the side of individual liberty and not on the side of being monitored, even if that means that there are maybe some additional safety risk, because I think that's a life better lived than a life where you're being controlled. But that's just me.
Yeah, and I think even in today's time, it gets convoluted with the technology stage that we're at in today's time, with whether it be our TVs or our phones or even the rings or watches that we wear that track us and get information. Everybody always says, well, you're already being tracked anyways, but those are all voluntary transactions and not necessarily something that the government has, well, quote unquote, doesn't have a backdoor access to. But when we're riding around on our own private side of things, to not be tracked and not to be in a situation to where this can be mined later on down the road for good or nefarious purposes. We've seen it even in our own county here in Mississippi, that those back-end services can be used in difficult ways. And I know nationwide, Flock has had a lot of issues with officers using them. So for me, it's a very slippery slope. One I'm definitely not wanting to go down, but and thankfully Sean Tyndall isn't wanting to go down that road again now.
Yeah, Michael, thank you for the call. I think it's informative to hear the way that Mississippians think about these issues. And like I said, we're going to have to keep grappling and fighting with how much we want to use technology for these sorts of things. We got to take a brief break. When we get back, we'll wrap up with a couple Supreme Court cases that we're expecting maybe to come down tomorrow. One of them a Mississippi case, the other one big implications for immigration policy across the country. I'm talking about the birthright citizenship case. We'll talk about that on the back end of this break. Be right back.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Every parent wants their child to grow, to explore, and to dream big. At MPB, we're proud to support families and teachers across Mississippi with trusted educational programming and resources that inspire learning and spark imagination. From PBS Kids Favorites to digital tools and early learning support, MPB is here for young minds, engaged classrooms, and families who believe in the power of learning at every age. Empowering families, inspiring learners. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Together through the years, together in the future. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're You're listening to The Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. The show has gone fast today.
Yeah, it has moved quite
We've got
quickly.
Some good callers today.
Yeah.
We've talked about politics, which is always fun. Who's going to run for what? What does that look like for Mississippi and Neshoba County Fair going on right now? We've talked about AI and Big Brother, or maybe just another way to keep us safe on the roads. Different opinions. I know folks were pretty upset with the idea. And now I want to talk really quickly about two cases that the Supreme Court has yet to issue a decision on. Their term is coming to an end here. It is expected that we could see these decisions tomorrow. One of them is a Mississippi case, Watson versus the Republican National Committee. That Watson is Secretary of State Michael Watson, who was sued in his official capacity as the guy who's over elections by the Republican Party. I don't think they're actually at odds with each other. The essence of the case was this, that in 2020, during COVID, the Mississippi legislature decided to allow absentee ballots to come in up to 5 business days after the election was over, after Election Day, as long as it was postmarked on or before the election. And you see other states doing this. Like, it's been a big controversy, like in California with like the Los Angeles mayor race. You had a guy that looked like he was in a runoff comfortably, and then he ended up getting supplanted by mail-in ballots that came in after Election Day.
1 week later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, it for a lot of people, it raises concerns about, like, is this really a good way to have election integrity? There are other people who think that it is. Anyway, the Republican Party sued the state of Mississippi, essentially saying the enforcement of this law violates the Constitution as it comes to federal elections, because the Constitution gives Congress the authority to set the time for elections. They've set that time by statute with an election day that occurs the first Tuesday after the first Monday or something like that, early November, and because of that, when the day is over, the election is over, is the argument. They lost in district court in Mississippi, but then the Fifth Circuit agreed with them that no, Election Day is Election Day. So ballots that come in after Election Day should not be counted. This has massive implications, not just for Mississippi, but for lots of states across the country that during COVID saw an acceleration of using mail-in ballots, not just for absentees, but for like just general ballots.
Nobody wanted to walk in.
Nobody wanted to come in anymore. And so for a lot of these states that are accepting ballots even much later, some of these states, it looks like 2 and 3 weeks by the time you add up weekends and all this stuff, the ballots can come in. They're potentially going to be curtailed by whatever the Supreme Court does with this case. So if the Supreme Court agrees and says, no, Election Day means Election Day, and if the ballots aren't in by the end of the Election Day, they don't get counted, that means that it's going to change the electoral landscape broadly across the entire country. I normally have a crystal ball on these things or an inkling of which direction they're going to go.
You couldn't know this one, though.
I don't know on this one. I honestly don't know. I mean, I think they're good arguments on both sides. So we're going to see what happens.
The only thing is I hate to wait on pins and needles for forever for a decision, but, I mean, if we're counting correctly.
Yeah. No, I think there is some legitimacy to the idea that it's less secure than somebody coming and standing in line, right? Because there are examples of ballot harvesting where people go out to nursing homes, get ballots filled out, take them, send them in. So it is a less secure way of doing elections. A lot of people like it. So we'll see how it comes down. The other big one is birthright citizenship. One of the first things that President Trump did when he came into office was to sign an executive order essentially saying there was no birthright citizenship, which means that if you're a baby born to two parents who are here illegally or undocumented, that you don't automatically become a U.S. citizen. It has been the case really since the passage of the 14th Amendment or ratification of the 14th Amendment that people who are born here, regardless of the nationality of their parents, have been considered U.S. citizens. And there is a U.S. Supreme Court case that's 128 years old called Young Kim Ark that basically said that with a person that was born here to two Chinese parents, neither of whom were here as nationalized U.S. citizens. The 14th Amendment itself is pretty clear on this point. As long as the baby is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So a lot of people who are arguing that there shouldn't be birthright citizenship are hanging their hats on this phrase, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Some people also point out that the 14th Amendment was really about freed slaves, which at some level is true, but the drafters of the 14th Amendment did not limit it to free slaves. They said that all of these rights are available to everybody, including free slaves, but they're available to everybody. So there's nothing in the text of the 14th Amendment that limits the birthright citizenship provision to freed slaves. But the subject of the jurisdiction of is sort of the line that people have been using to argue that maybe there's a way to say that people born here are not U.S. citizens. The problem with that is that if you look at the history of the amendment and what that meant, it was referring to people who were either Native Americans that had their own sovereignty because they had been given reservations and sovereignty over that, or the children of diplomats who literally had immunity from U.S. courts. And so it is not true that immigrants are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States because they can be hauled into court and punished. If they weren't subject to our jurisdiction, they would not be subject to the penalty of our law, which is true of diplomats, but not of people who are here illegally. So I have a very hard time believing. I will pull out the crystal ball on this. There are going to be a lot of people who are mad about what the Supreme Court does. The president's going to be mad about what the Supreme Court does. There are a lot of people who just disagree with birthright citizenship. That's fine. It's in the Constitution. And so I have a very hard time believing that the U.S. Supreme Court, whether it's tomorrow or and it'll probably be tomorrow, that they're going to invalidate birthright citizenship and change precedent from a 128-year-old precedent. I think that was fairly certain or clear in the questions that were given. Chief Justice John Roberts during that hearing basically said it may be a new world, but it's not a new constitution, in response to the argument that things had changed since the 14th Amendment got ratified. So we're going to look out for that.
Let's delve into that more, too. I like all of it.
This show has gone fast. We've covered a lot of stuff. I'm glad that you've joined us to listen. Hope you'll come back next week. The Sit Down is a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting, Think Radio, made possible thanks to the generous support of listeners just like you. If you enjoy the guest and sit-downs we bring each week, please consider contributing to help keep this show and shows like it on the air. Visit mpbonline.org or show your support using the MPB Public Media app. Today's show was produced by the always wonderful Germaine Flood with live stream production by Abram Nanny and Marissa Vaughn, who is fabulous. Join us here next week for a new episode of The Sit Down, heard only on MPB Think Radio.